Procreate tutorial, I'll be walking you through how to create this faux paper cut illustration. If I zoom in here, you can really see the paper effect, and then we add a slight shadow to everything to give it that paper cutout look. I did it in several different colors, just testing things out to see what shows best, and sometimes we'll have to play with opacity and doubling up on layers to really get that paper effect to show through. The color scheme that we'll be walking through together is this peach and pink one. And on the blog, as usual, I have a little reference sheet you can download so you can glance at it while we're working. It's got your color palette and the basic project supplies. All you really need is a monoline brush and some kind of texture brush. I am using the watercolor paper brush from my watercolor kit, and then I'm using a few heart stamps. The rest will be drawing from scratch. But again, all you really need is a monoline and some kind of paper texture brush. Before we get started on the tutorial, I wanted to kind of show you the overall process and walk you through what I did. So to do that, I'm just going to come up here to my actions panel and replay the time lapse. You can see I started with a different project. I was trying to decide what to do for this faux paper and ultimately ended up doing this record. So I'm basically drawing some simple shapes. I added textures as I went since I was playing around. We will do that as the last step in our piece. And then I really wanted you to see the lettering piece because that is a piece where you'll pause the video and put your own lettering on. You can use the same phrase I did, you can use something different, song lyrics that inspire you, but this kind of shows you, it took me a while to sketch it out and then deciding on my lettering style, and then I gradually put in each letter. The little dot helps me keep each letter a consistent width. So I just draw one letter, make a dot, and then move that dot around to keep my lettering a consistent width. And as I'm working, I have every letter on its own layer, and then I can duplicate, like I have an R here and an R here, and then I'll just sometimes adjust maybe the leg of the R to make it fit that specific word, but it also allows me to change the shape or the size so it fits like I want it to. And then once it's all done, I put it all on its own layer. So when we get to the lettering phase of this piece, I will mention to you, go ahead and pause, add your lettering, because the point of today's tutorial is more to teach you the faux paper cut effect than it is the lettering piece. So don't let the lettering stress you out. You could even make this illustration with zero lettering on it and just do the record, the music notes, the arm, and the hearts. So let's start by creating a new canvas. You want to do a square one. So I'm going to tap my plus sign, and I've already got a square canvas set up. I have a 2000 by 2000 pixel one and a 3000 by 3000. It doesn't really matter. I'll go ahead and do my 3000 or the 2000 by 2000, and I have that set up at 300 DPI. Now we're going to be drawing some shapes that we're going to want to center on our canvas. So an easy way to do that is to come over to the actions panel, which is your little wrench here, click canvas, and then click drawing guide. Now we want to edit. I don't want that graph, so I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to take my grid size and just make it so I have 4 quadrants. And you can change the color of your lines if you want to using this bar. Black is fine for what we're doing. So whoops, I changed it to white. I'm going to put it back to black, and you can now toggle that on and off if you need to, just by coming up and clicking drawing guide on and off. So let's go ahead and rename our first layer background. And this is going to be the light peach color from the color palette I gave you. And now add a new layer and rename that record. And this is going to be the main part of our record. And for this one, I'm going to use that almost black color that I gave you. So you're going to take a monoline brush, any monoline brush will do, and you're going to draw a circle, hold your pen, and now tap your finger. See how that creates a perfect circle? So you can just release, and now tap your arrow, and you can use the blue dots to perfectly align this on our artboard guide. So that was the drawing guide we set up, so I can get that pretty much perfectly centered, and then drag and drop my color, and now the main part of our record is done. Now we are going to do a record center. So I'll rename this, I'll call it record center. You can call it whatever you want. This just will help you keep it organized when we start adding shadows to every layer and adding textures. For this one, I used a teal color. You can use the exact same one I did, or you can use any color you would like. Again, we are on our own layer here, and we're just gonna estimate. We want it to be roughly maybe 1/4 of the record size. So I'm gonna go about there, make it a perfect circle, and then again, I'm gonna tap it into place using the arrow tool to make sure it is nice and centered. And then we're gonna do that yet again because we wanna have if you look at your reference sheet, we've got that little gray center as well. So I used a really light gray for that. And I will grab the light gray. I'll call this one just center because it'll be the center of our piece. And once again, I'm gonna draw and this one's gonna be pretty small. Perfect circle, drag and drop our color, and then center it into place. And I might even use a slightly lighter gray. That might not have been what I used the first time. Just a little brighter. Okay, maybe even one darker. That looks almost white to me. Okay, we'll leave it there. And now we want to add some simple highlights. So I just did some really basic, because you want to think about when you're doing this, like, what would it look like if I were doing real paper? You can't do anything super detailed. I mean, you could, but realistically, you're not going to have something crazy detailed. And we're going to use these guidelines again. So if we want to, now that they don't show up as well on the black here, we could edit our drawing guide and just change the color of those. Oh, it still doesn't show up over my black. Oh, there we go. Just wasn't changing on me. So if I change the color now, I can see those better, and that'll help us draw our highlights. So add a new layer and rename it Record Highlights. And I used a medium gray for this one. So I'm gonna go for just kind of a medium gray, and the one I used on your color palette is the exact one I had used. Might have been that one. And what I'm gonna do is draw a straight line right on top of that guideline. And then I'm going to swipe left, duplicate, tap my arrow tool here and click rotate 45. And then I'm gonna slide that in place. And I'm gonna guesstimate a little here, but I want about the same distance between the circle and that. So maybe I want to come down a little. It doesn't have to be perfect because we can erase things out. So now you can go ahead and tap your top layer and merge it down so all your record highlight is on one. And then we're going to want to connect those two. So with kind of an arc shape that mimics and you can tap your finger to make a nice arc as well. And then same thing at the top. You can 2-finger tap to undo if you accidentally make a little mark like I did. And again, I'll tap to make that perfect circle. And then I'm just gonna drag and drop to fill my color. And then you can see that I overshot a little here. So I'll just gently erase that out. And okay, that looks pretty good. And we want our highlight to be on the other side as well. So I'm gonna swipe left, duplicate, grab my arrow tool, and I want it here, but I want it to face the other way. So I'm just gonna rotate it and then use my guidelines to slide it into place. All right, so now we have our record highlights. Next, we will work on our record arm here. So we've got this little arm coming in, and I just freehanded this. So we're gonna put everything on its own layer again so we can go back and edit if we need to. Our record highlights, those are fine to have on the same layer. So let's go ahead and tap and merge down. And let's start with our record arm base. So let's call this arm base. And this is gonna be that same medium gray color that we're already on. So how I did this is I drew, I'm on eraser, on the pen tool, draw a circle just on the edge of your page, tap your finger to get that perfect circle. And then we're gonna move it so it's hanging off the page. So it's right kind of just a little bit down, and it's hanging halfway off the page. So I put it about right there. And I can always change that later if I need to. And now we want a darker part for that. So we're going to add a new, we're gonna put this base top because we'll have another layer, and we wanna go back to this really dark color that we use. So you can tap this little box right here and it will let you pull up the quick selection tool. And I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna draw a little circle, tap my finger to make it a perfect circle, fill it, and then kind of slide it into place on top of my other base. So now you can see I've got a base right there. Now in between that, I wanna add a new layer, and we're gonna call this the record arm. So I'm just gonna put arm. We're gonna go back to that light gray color. So I'll use my selection color picker tool, grab that. And now you wanna use kind of a thick monoline brush, because we're gonna do something kind of like, we're just gonna freehand it, something kind of like that. So you can test the size. And I just kind of drew an arm that's shaped a little like that. You can tap to undo and redo it as many times as you feel like you need. And we have, I don't like the curve of that one. I like my first one better. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that like that. You can mess with it forever if you want to, you can leave it. But now we need to make the head of the arm. So that is kind of a little trapezoid shape, and we're gonna do one that is in the gray color and then one that's in the medium gray on top of it. So I'm gonna go back to my smaller monoline brush. You might have a monoline brush that goes really small to really big. I usually like to use this detail and then a bigger one depending on what I'm working on. So just for a second, I am going to, let me go back and see if I did this on its own layer or I did too. So the arm, that is all on one layer, okay. Just double checking, sometimes I forget exactly what I did. So we're gonna start on its own layer just so we have more control, and then we'll merge it down. So you're making, like I said, kind of a trapezoid shape here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the top is a little bit arced and then the bottom is straight. And if you hold your pencil down, you get that nice straight line. And then just fill it in and touch up anything you need to touch up if you need to. And then we're gonna do the exact same thing, but in a dark color. So sometimes you can just, let's try duplicating it, picking our medium gray color, dropping it in, and then we'll just resize it. Make sure you are on uniform down here. Just make it a little smaller. Yep, that worked pretty well. So we'll just do that. And now we've got, so go back to your light gray arm piece and merge it down with your main arm. And then we'll call this, we'll call it arm top, or whatever is gonna help you remember. You can always like top it on and off, but it's easier for me if I can kind of name them what I think I want them to be named. So there's the main part of our record. We've got our record arm. So now we just need to add our music notes and our hearts. I drew the music notes by hand, and then I have a lot of heart stamps in my collection, so I use stamps for those, but you can totally draw those by hand as well. So for the music notes, I will add a new layer, music notes. And for that, I used white and a larger monoline brush. And what I did for the first one, I just kind of drew a slightly, oh, too big, a slightly curved line. And then I drew a perfect circle. So a circle, hold finger, fill, and then I'm gonna use this little magic wand tool, selection tool here, circle it, and then slide it into place. And now to get my second one of those, I'm just gonna click duplicate, and this one will go a little further down. And then we're gonna use that again. So I'm gonna duplicate one more time, and I'm gonna drag that one to this corner for the moment. But these first two are the two we are going to have merged together. So I'll tap that and click merge down. And now I can see that I really need to, I'm gonna use a smaller brush, smooth out this curve right here. And here, and then you're just gonna connect them. and fill it. And you can square off the corners if you want to. You can leave them rounded, whatever you think looks best. I'm gonna smooth that out even a little more. Sometimes if you zoom out, you'll notice things that you didn't notice at first. And we can always move that around. It'll probably end up farther up. Depending on how your lettering is, you may need to move it. You might even need to make it a little smaller. I found that mine were way too big at first, and I ended up having to make them smaller once I had added my lettering on. Then we'll come back to this music note that's in the bottom here, and I'm gonna smooth that one out as well. And then this one has just the music flag on it. So I'm actually gonna come up just a little. And if you need to maybe look at music clip art online or something to help you know how you wanna draw yours, you can totally do that. Or you can use the exact same two I did. All right, and then that one is easily moved as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge those down so they're on one layer because I can still move them around using my selection tool. And now my final step is to just go in and add my hearts. And like I said, I used in my folk art kit, I have tons of hearts. So I used heart 4, heart 5, and heart 6. So I'll start with heart 4, and I use that really bright pink color here. So I'm gonna use a bright pink, and we'll start with this lopsided heart kind of. Oops, forgot to add a new layer. All right, add a new layer, rename hearts, because we'll have multiple, I guess. So I'll do one, and then in my original piece, I can see that I had that a little off the page, so I might shrink it down just a little, put it there, and then I'll do my next heart, which I did, it looks like I did heart 6 down here. So I'm just gonna stamp that in the middle of the page and then use my selection tool to slide it into place. I can rotate the angle, and I'm gonna have that overlap my record just a little. I can always move it around later, like I said, when I have all my lettering on. And then I'm gonna use heart 7, and that one will end up like right here. So now here is where you might want to pause and add your lettering. That is a really long process for me to go through sitting there. I don't want you to have to watch me letter since I showed you the video. So I'm just gonna bring my lettering in, and then we'll start adding our textures and shadows. So this would be a good place for you to pause the video, add your lettering around the edge if you want to, and we will start adding the final details that give us that faux paper effect next. So now I've brought my lettering in, and you can see that certain things overlap, and maybe it's in a way that distracts from my lettering. So what I usually go do at this point is go in and adjust things. So if I want to adjust that music note so everything shows, I will just pull it up, maybe shrink the size just a wee bit, and then you can see like this heart would probably look better if it was centered up between those two words a little. And these two hearts I might pull down or over just a little. And then the arm, I think it's still readable over the your, but it might look better if I adjusted it just a little. So if I want to move the whole arm, you can see I've got that top as well. So I'll select both of those by swiping right. And then I might just adjust the angle of this so that it's in between, which makes it a little more readable. And then I might need to adjust my, my base and my top so it's centered. So my base is here and my base top is here. So since we have it nicely labeled, it makes it really easy to kind of shift things around and readjust them. And now we don't really need our canvas drawing line, so I can tap my action panel, wrench tool, canvas, and toggle those drawing guides off. So our whole piece is done, and the only thing I'm still a little unhappy with is I feel like this is too close to the edge. So I'll go back and circle that, maybe just make it a little smaller, create a little more balance. Next, we will start adding shadows and textures. Let's start with textures. So I'm in my watercolor lettering kit, and I have several different watercolor paper textures. I have fine, medium, and coarse. We really want it to stand out on this piece, so I'm going to, I can't even remember what I used the first time, but I'm gonna go for coarse. And I'm gonna grab just a light gray color, and test it out. So above our background, we're gonna rename this texture. Oops. And the key with texture is once you start laying it down, you don't wanna lift your pencil. So I will go over the whole thing in one fluid motion. And so you can see that looks pretty good, but I would like it to be a little brighter. So sometimes I'll just duplicate it and see that increases the intensity, and you can tap your N and mess with the opacity. And then I'll usually go ahead and merge it down so that it's all on one layer. You can also play with some of these options to see what shows up best. Like on this one, I think add looks really good. So, which is often what I do on my watercolor lettering, but it kind of depends on what color is below it, what looks best. So I'm gonna do that one, and that gives me that nice paper texture. You could also, I'll delete that, and I'm gonna try the medium just for comparison and see what I think of the medium. I think I like that better. So I'm gonna do the same process again, duplicate, reduce opacity, merge it down, and then I'm gonna switch this to add. Go about there. Okay, so I'll rename that texture. And then what I usually do is swipe left, duplicate, and then hold and drag that all the way up to the top. And can you see how that adds texture to everything else? So now I know maybe that makes this texture too strong. So I'll turn that down. I might not even need it, but part of that is because I have tap on add, and I don't know if I want to keep that. So I'll play with the textures, and I actually think add looks pretty good. So I can play with opacity. Because it is on darker colors, you really want to make it a little overly, not so subtle. You want to make it really stand out, especially when you're posting it online, because it won't stand out as much. Textures kind of have to be in your face to really show up. So I might not need that after all. Sometimes you'll need that extra over the background, just depending on your colors. So maybe on the dark background, I would have done that. So since I don't need that, I will, actually we're still gonna use it because we have these white pieces and it doesn't show up as much on the white. So I'm gonna move this above our lettering, which I should have named. So I'll rename that lettering. So all I'm doing is adding extra texture layers, and I want it to show up on the white, and it doesn't right now with normal. Oop, I'm on the wrong layer. On add, so I wanna go back to maybe normal. I wanna find something that makes it stand out on the white. And none of that really does. So let's make it even bolder. And we're gonna actually put a clipping mask on this so it's confined to just our lettering. So we could go ahead and tap that, and then we can see a little better if that works well. So I think the color isn't dark enough to show up well. So you could either erase it and try using a darker color, or you can come over to your adjustments panel, this little magic wand tool, click hue, saturation, and brightness. And you see how you can see it now because I've made it so much darker. So I'll bring the brightness down. And now my lettering also has some texture. And our music notes need that as well. So I will duplicate that layer, bring it above my music notes. And again, I only want it to apply to my music notes. So watch what happens if I tap clipping mask, and then everything in the background goes back to normal. So anything that's light, you might need to add that extra layer of texture on. And if you feel like it's too dark, after you've darkened it up, you can make it a little more subtle using the opacity. So I might take that to like 75-ish, and I'll do the same thing with the one above the lettering. So now we have paper texture applied to everything, but it still looks kind of, it doesn't pop enough, right? So the way we do that is by adding shadows to every layer. So it's a little time consuming, but it's very easy. So I'll walk you through that next. All right, so let's start at the bottom and work our way up. So our record needs some shadows. So we're gonna click duplicate, tap your bottom layer and rename shadow. This is already a dark color, so we don't need to make it black. All we are going to do is come up to the adjustments panel. We're gonna click motion blur and I'm gonna drag it. I'm gonna have all my shadows go to the right corner and I'm gonna make note of what my percentage is up here. So I'm gonna go to roughly, let's do like 12%. And then I'm gonna slide that into place so that it's down on the side just a little. And then I can play with the opacity. So I want it to be somewhat subtle, but also pop. So that one I have at about, let's do like 30%. And then kind of remember that as well. It doesn't have to be exact, but we're gonna repeat that for everything. So record center, we will duplicate. And now we're gonna grab like our blackest black. So if you come down to classic, you can bring your color tool down and get a super black color. Because we have an almost black here, we're gonna need that to make it stand out. So again, we'll hit our magic wand, click motion blur. I'm gonna go to 12 from the bottom corner again. I'll tap that into place. And you can see that's pretty subtle because we're on black. So sometimes I will duplicate. Oop. There we go. Duplicate and merge down. I forgot to rename that one. So that is our shadow again. It gets a little complicated. You're gonna have a lot of layers, but you could group them at the end to reorganize them. And I might do one more and see if it gets just a little darker just because it's over that blackish color. So we'll do the same thing again with the center. We'll duplicate, we'll rename the bottom one shadow. We'll drag and drop our dark color right in there. And then because this one is so little, I probably won't do a full 12% on my motion blur. So I'll just kind of eyeball it. So I'm gonna go maybe 8% here, slide it into place. And then I'll make that one more subtle than 30% most likely. It's all right. We can do 30-ish% again. So you're just gonna keep doing that with every single layer. So again, we have our center. So now our record highlights, we're gonna duplicate. We'll rename that shadow. We'll drag our super black color down, tap, motion blur, get to our 12%. Oops, I went a little too far. 2-finger tap to undo. 12%, you slide it into place in that bottom right corner. And again, I'm gonna duplicate that one a few times to make it more intense, merge it down, just because it's over that blackish, way blackish color. So I might leave it at full intensity. I might make it a little more subtle, and then watch the lettering pop when we do it. Now, when you have a bigger piece like lettering, we'll duplicate, we'll rename that shadow. Instead of dragging and dropping to every letter, we can just tap it and click select, tap it again and click fill. And so now our letters are filled with black. And then again, we will use our motion blur, drag it to 12-ish%, slide it into place. And now if I pop that off and on, you can start to see how that really makes things pop off the page. And again, since that's on a dark black, you might want to duplicate and merge down to increase the intensity. Really helps that pop. So I'm gonna go through and keep doing that with every element. So I'll do it with the bases, I'll do it with the arm topper, the hearts, and the music notes. So you want that shadow, oops, I tapped that, on every single layer. And then at the end, you can decide if your textures you think are too intense, you can kind of play with those and maybe make them a little more subtle. Like I think that one looks a little intense, so I might bring it down just a wee bit until I am happy with everything. But that is really it for this piece. We'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like after I add the remaining shadows. Okay, so I added shadows to all my pieces and my hearts, each element of the record arm and base, and then my music notes. And then I adjusted my texture just a little bit to be a little more subtle by playing with the elements I showed you in the class. And now you can see you have that fun paper cutout effect. And you can do this with anything. I think the key is really just to think about if you were sitting and cutting these elements out with scissor or like a Cricut or Silhouette Cameo, which I am actually going to try using my Silhouette Cameo to cut this out and do an actual paper art piece. But think about what you could feasibly cut. Like anything too intricate might start to look not paper cut. You want to keep things fairly simple and basic. And I hope you have a lot of fun with this. If you post what you made on Instagram, I would love to see it. Tag me at @ByDawnNicole. And hopefully I will have a tutorial again for you next month. We're in the process of moving from one state to halfway across the country. So I'm playing everything by ear, but I at least wanted to kick you off before they pack up all my office stuff into boxes with a new tutorial to start off 2022.